Yeah, just recently, of course, the sad news of Kevin Conroy passing. I know it brought me to tears because he was a big part of my life growing up, as well as most of us on this, because he was the voice of Batman,
The definitive
voice of Batman.
For some people, he was Batman.
I mean, that whole show, right, defined an entire
for a whole generation.
The voice, I mean, because it's not just Conroy, right? Like Hamill, everybody, there's a whole generation of people that anytime they see the Joker, the immediate voice that jumps to their mind is Hamill, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody in that show. I have a hard time watching almost anything animated wise, Batman related, and seeing any of the characters from it and not being able to hear those old animated series voices with them. They always sound just a little bit off just because of how long, that's been with me. And it even extended beyond that to like Tim Daly as Superman and all the rest of that stuff. It's just those are the voices that get conjured into your head.
That's
Well,
right.
you also think about the vet David Warner passing just not too long ago, and he was in there as Ra's, and then
Ra's
you have Ron Perlman playing, but he hasn't passed, luckily.
I was about to say,
knock on wood here. Knock on wood.
So many
what did I miss?
There were so many great actors who wanted to be part of that and did so many voices. But when you said Ty Daly, I was like, oh no, now I go back to the live action shorts that they would do with each other, him and Kevin. The underwear, what underwear are you wearing and all that. Oh man, that was a place I didn't want to go back to.
Not the Comedy Central one. But yeah.
You know what's sad is when I see Hamill's Joker, I have to go back to the original Flash series and the Trickster.
Yes.
Because it seemed like he just carried that character over into the Joker, changed it enough, and then it became the definitive Joker. I really kind of liked that Heath Ledger Joker because he was just that non-assuming, threatening voice. He wasn't the over-the-top crazy. And I can handle over the top crazy, that guy who can just kind of talk to you and then go from sane to crazy in a split second.
Yeah, 0 to
60. 0 to 60 kind of scare me.
Yes.
And we got a lot from that Flash because the theme music from the Flash led into the theme music for the Batman series and the Tim Burton Batman movie.
Because Danny Elfman was behind all of it.
Danny Elfman did it, yeah.
Well, technically, it was Batman first, and then it led into the Flash and then the cartoon.
I thought the Flash TV show was before Batman.
Came after, yeah. That was definitely a part, a product of that time.
I mean, it opened so many doors. I mean, it wasn't just the great voice cast. It wasn't just good writing and engaging stories. It was the totality of it, and it became the resurgence.
Just that the opening sequence was the best Batman that you'll ever see. The told you everything about Gotham, told you everything you needed to know about the Batman character, and that rooftop fight scene with the gangsters and the machine gun, and man, that was just it.
Yeah, it just spelled it out for you. It just laid it all out.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, and a lot of that was like Bruce Timm, of course,
Yeah.
He's done some questionable stuff in recent times, but back then he had his finger right on the pulse of what needed to be done.
But see, I'm old school. I remember the Adventures of Superman, the Adventures of Batman, the Adventures of Batman and Robin.
Right.
Those old 60s and 70s cartoons, which were based on, how the comics were. And then we got the Batman cartoon, which was a hybrid between Tim Burton's, Batman and some of the later stories of Batman. You couldn't tell what era it took place in. Was it now? Was it in the past? Dirigibles flying in the sky, but then you have a Batmobile.
The aesthetic of it was,
it looks like a rocket car.
Yeah, the aesthetics of it basically looked Art Deco, but at the same time, it was very modern. Which was always one of the appealing things to me, because always Art Deco style. So it's basically like Gotham became timeless for me.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
You know, and I don't know where they found Kevin Conroy to do the voice for that, but man, it was like, you know, it was like sifting through 100 pounds of sand to find one little piece of gold.
Well, there's a lady who was the voice caster for majority of the DC
Andrea,
cartoons, and she always just seemed to know exactly what voice was needed for what film or what series they were doing.
What was her name?
Yeah.
Andrea. Oh, it's right there. But yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah, because she was like the voice casting guru for Warner Brothers at that time.
Mm-hmm.
For all of
And
their
what was
projects.
funny is a lot of the main people played other characters in the show.
Yes.
You know, because Kevin Conroy played several characters in the show, but
yes, he did.
One of the things was the guy who they got to play Commissioner Gordon also played the voice of Superboy back in the old Superman cartoon, the Superboy cartoon show. So
Okay.
she knew a voice that would hit that right nostalgic.
She knew what their potential was.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been Bob Hastings as far as Commissioner Gordon.
Yes.
And then let me see.
When he passed, it was kind of rough too.
There's just like when it led into so many different cartoons. We had the two movies, of course. As far as the official stuff.
Well, we had Static Shock that came from there. We had Batman Beyond that came from there. We had, what was the one about the robot 07 or something like that? That was an offshoot of the show because he guest starred in Static Shock. So each show was an offshoot of one and then led to somebody else. And then we got Justice League. We got Justice League Unlimited, you know.
And then it all came to a screeching halt.
I'd like to address something David brought up in the chat. And both of my boys agreed with you, David, that Mask of the Phantasm was the peak. Both of my boys actually agreed with that. That was the absolute zenith of all of the Batman animated stuff. That was the high point of it. Granted, a lot of it was still good, and Kevin Conroy, Mark Hamill still delivered as always, and even beyond that. But looking back at it, I don't disagree with it.
Well, a lot of it had to do with the fact that you know, you had parents wanting to toe down the violence, and then they also went to that whole thing where it was the new adventure. What was it? The Batman and Robin, and they changed the color schemes on the characters. To make it easier for the animation.
Yeah.
Production. Yeah.
I thought they went overboard with a lot of the red. I didn't like how they changed the look of Catwoman. There were a lot of decisions making in that show, that second series, which is really just an offshoot of the first one.
Right.
And they introduced Tim, and that I felt were kind of awkward. But I don't know. I liked Sub-Zero. I thought there was a much deeper story than Phantasm. Phantasm was the first. It was kind of, they're making their way. And one thing that, like, when Kevin Conroy had to pretend to be young Bruce Wayne, and they had him, instead of casting a actor to be a child voice, they had him doing that soft kind of kiddie voice. It just didn't fit. I was like, man, make him a kid, get a kid actor to be him. And then the whole love story. One of the things with Batman I can't stand is he's always falls in love with somebody, and then they have to leave and they move on. And that was the same thing over again. You know, he had that chance to have a normal life. He chose to be Batman. The woman left with her father. Her father was a judge. Wasn't Two-Face in that movie too? in Mask of the Phantasm, or was that another episode? Because
I think that was another
It
thing.
would have been Dent, I think. I Two-Face, no. But
No.
okay,
Dent might have shown up in it. It's been a
shown up
long
in it.
time I've watched it, but
the one thing I did enjoy about it was how we got to watch the villains be created. They did give us a lot of origins in that series.
those are some of the best episodes, honestly. Like Feet of Clay.
Oh yeah.
In that series is so fantastic. I know I think I've talked about it before, but yeah, just that whole sequence like that, and it was always two-parters, right? Like in fact, I think the only villain I can think of off the top of my head, well, there's a couple of them, right? Man-Bat wasn't a two-parter.
No. I don't think Iceman, Jesus. Mr. Freeze was two-parter either.
Ice? No.
It was all done in one.
No,
one
but
episode.
he did come back repeatedly in the series.
And then one of my other big favorite ones was the Riddler, right? If you got all the titles of his episodes were so long. If you're so smart, why aren't you rich? I think was the name of the first one of his.
First one, yeah.
And that was, yeah. I mean, again,
well,
like,
and then we got Clockmaster.
Because like,
Tempest Fugit.
Yeah. There you go. But like Mr. Freeze, right? That show created Mr. Freeze. Before that, he was Mr. Zero.
Yeah, Mr. Zero.
A completely different setup, completely different background that completely changed him.
He was a thief, you know.
For better or worse.
But I mean, they gave us Mad Hatter. They gave us I don't remember if they did Calendar Man, but they did the Ventriloquist. They brought in some of the most obscure Batman villains and made them dangerous.
Yeah,
Killer Croc.
Killer Croc was great.
Killer Croc.
Episode 1 is Man-Bat.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's crazy. Like, you're really going to lead in with Man-Bat? And I know you talked on the last episode we did where we were talking about the animated series stuff in general, that you really like the Batman. I struggled to get into the Batman because it felt like every other episode was Joker. It was like just Joker and Joker and Joker.
It got away from there. Like once we got into Firefly and a bunch of the other villains, but yeah. And then he looked like not a Haviline, but he looked like almost like one of Harley's pets, not a jackal, hyena. With the way his hair looked, and he was barefoot. But in that show, they did one of the Batman where he donned the Batman outfit and pretended to be Batman. Yeah. So we didn't get that in the Batman. Joker was the Joker, and that's who he wanted to be. In that, we got to see more of that relationship with where they were an adversary in Batman the Animated. This was Joker kind of looked up to Batman in a way because he was like, I want to be like you, and almost I want to wear your skin. That kind of, okay, you're a little extreme, but the Batman was always constantly trying to save the people. Every episode he, like I always thought that Batman Animated, that he would kill him as well as look at him. Like if you're gonna take out too many people, I'm gonna kill you. But the Batman series, he seemed more like I know these people aren't responsible for who they are. Sometimes they're like when they did the whole Clayface thing, he was an ex-vet friend and become Clayface, and he was really trying to save him. Harvey Dent Two-Face was a sympathetic character, because he was actually a good man who had an abusive past that gave him a kind of split personality, and then they had Robin. Robin was in the forefront with the Batman until Batgirl came along, and then Robin became the poodle that fit in her purse. But I like the fact that in the show they had him going, wait a minute, I was here first, and there was that fighting between the two to who was going to get the limelight from Bruce. And Bruce was like, look, I trying to be the best father he could be, having not remembered his father. There was just so much going for the Batman. It modeled itself after the 60s show, but took it serious. It wasn't camp. And then when they brought in the Justice League and they brought in all those other elements, that whole fight between him and Superman was great. Then Batman's off doing something, so Robin's in trouble. Who does he call? He calls Clark. He goes, "Hey, I need you to pretend to be Batman. I'll handle everything. You just stand around and look tough." And then, Bane comes up and punches Superman in the face, and he goes, "Is that all you got?" He goes, "When did you become so strong?" And he's like, "No, no, no, this is my time to shine." Robin's like, "This is my time to shine. You just stand there and look good," it just elements were there. And it went 5 seasons. We barely got 5 seasons out of the Batman because of, and then part of it had to switch over to Batman and Robin because it was Fox, right? That it originally came on. I can't remember which station it was on. Wanted to calm down some of the violence. And at the time, I think Bruce Timm was kind of getting tired, a little bit burned out. He'd been doing Superman and Batman, and they started bringing other people in.
I will say this: Kevin Michael Richardson as Joker was not bad.
No, he wasn't.
It was an interesting take. It wasn't Mark Hamill, but it was a little unhinged, and there was a hint of laughter in there. There was levity when it needed to be there. I did not dislike Kevin Michael Richardson because that man's got some real storied history as far as voice acting goes himself. And I wasn't in it. Was it Paul Dino that was Batman in it? If I remember right.
I can't remember.
But Kevin Michael Richardson's Joker.
The guy who did him also did Spider-Man Unlimited, if I remember right. I know he played another hero in another cartoon series.
I don't know.
Vince
Kevin
has the internet. I think he can look it up.
Yeah, but
I'm looking it up right now.
Kevin Michael Richardson, he's got some real history behind him.
Well, I mean, we need to. Let me pull this up real quick, but we need to move back to Kevin Conroy for a little bit real quick.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
but all this stuff, I mean, I guess to bring it back around, a lot of these people were basing off their versions off of either what Kevin Conroy did or didn't do, so they would either try and tie into that or say, okay, I don't want to disrupt what he's done because it was so fantastic, which is what Paul Dino did for Batman. He took it a different approach entirely because he didn't want to mess with what Kevin Conroy had established, which was great.
They wanted to make the character their own without stepping on what had previously been done, and they wanted to bring in those elements that they really appreciated and kind of change some of the things they thought might be a unique take on the character.
Right.
But Kevin Conroy had such a long run with Batman. He played him in Batman Beyond. We got him in all the Justice League. He was just there. He was like,
well, he was also in the Arkham games.
And yep. That's right. Yes. When he talks about that in the video I sent, about how he approached the different genres, like how he made Batman for like the video game was slightly different than what he did with the animated. He did say he liked to bring in newer elements to him to give him multi-dimensional character.
Right.
Well, it would have been for Batman and the Batman series would have been Rhino Romano.
Okay, yes. Yes, thank you. But all right.
I always knew when something was good because I hated to miss the next episode. So I would do everything I could to be in front of it. But if I ever felt like, I can miss this episode, then it probably wasn't as good as it needed to be.
All right. So jumping ahead a little bit, what was the last one that he and Mark Hamill teamed up for the Batman? I want to say Killing Joke.
I think it was the Killing Joke, but
because I remember each of them saying, "I won't do it unless."
Yes, the other part's doing it.
Mm-hmm. Right, and they both said, "Okay, hey, if he wants in, I'm in," and they were both like, "Yeah, let's do this." And then, of course, Killing Joke went right off the rails. So it was kind of a mixed bag on it. I mean, if they had taken out that 1/2 hour of the whole Batgirl thing, which we talked about last episode, it would have been fantastic. I mean, it would have been right up there, you know, easily top 5, top 3 adaptations of all time.
And see, here's the thing: we probably could do a whole episode on Batman because there's like actors that I really thought did a good job on playing Batman.
Yeah.
The guy who played Christopher Pike in the Abrams Kelvin universe,
Anson
he
Mount?
was a voice. The guy who played Pike was the voice of Batman in several animated movies.
What is that? The new one or the original one?
The new one. The Kelvin
Okay,
is
'cause that
the
was Anson
alternate
Mount.
universe. So
that was Anson Mount, the guy who played Black Bolt.
What?
Anson Mount. He was the one who played Pike. In
Christopher Pike, the one who was.
You're talking about
guy,
Bruce Green, Dad. You're talking about Bruce Greenwood.
Greenwood, yeah,
Oh,
he
yeah,
played
okay,
Batman, and you lost me there because
Anson Mount played Pike in the new trilogy, right?
No,
it was Bruce Greenwood.
No, Bruce Greenwood.
Then what did Anson Mount play? He played. Was it? Oh, it was the new series. I'm sorry.
You lost.
Take my nerd card.
I thought I'd fallen into another.
I
thought I'd fallen into another universe again.
You should have started with actually.
Yeah.
Actually.
We'll get to that point.
But can you pull up a list of other things that he's done?
Who? Bruce Greenwood?
No.
Kevin Conroy?
Kevin Conroy, yeah. Because I know he had to have done more than just the voice of Batman. And
he was an actor back in that. Oh yeah, he'd already had himself established in acting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I saw his headshot this morning from way back in the day, before he started thinning out. He had the look. He definitely had that look.
What's funny is a lot of the actors we know of today that are like main characters used to often play bad cops in old movies. I mean, if you look at Danny Glover, he was one of the bad cops in The Witness with Harrison Ford.
Well, he's been in a lot of TV series.
He did a lot of TV series. Basically, almost all his movie work is Batman. But yeah, his TV stuff is where he really branched out.
Got it,
yeah.
And I think he'd been on a TV series before he got Batman. He was on.
I want to say he was on a soap opera
series.
Oh, I mean, that's what I'm saying. He's like he was in a lot of TV series, like How to Pick Up Girls. He played a bartender in that. Another World. Born Beautiful. A Midnight Summer's Dream. A Fine Romance. Kennedy. He played Ted Kennedy in that series.
Really?
It was only 5 episodes.
I'd like to see that. I'd like to see his take on Ted Kennedy.
George Washington.
He introduced himself into the American lexicon by his voice. You know how the inflection, the way he talked, and what he did. I love that.
Whoever taught him that skill, or at least got him in that direction, definitely needs a thank you.
Well, I mean, come on, where's it at?
Because I mean, he had enough acting chops and enough foresight and knowledge to be able to say, yeah, I can do this.
Well, if he did any work on the old soap operas, which were shot live, that is a great training ground for being able to act, because you don't get a second take.
But yeah, his first voice acting role was the Batman. I mean, it was Batman.
See, now,
and I remember him talking about how nervous he was because he was like, I don't think I'm right for this part. And he went in and lowered his voice, and then he would raise it for Bruce. And I remember him talking about how that he told the director, I see him as Clint Eastwood. And we were talking about that before we got started. And just, it was he sold the role to the people who were, you know, there to interview him and test him. And the whole, you know, just think about if they hadn't liked something or had an off day, we'd have this whole different world of Batman. But because he was chosen as Batman, everything, these dominoes fell into place. You know, we might not even have a Nolan Batman. We might not have everything we have.
Yeah,
because
it was all
back
based
then
on what he did.
superheroes weren't popular. Studios didn't think they'd make any money off of them. You know, they didn't want to invest in them.
Well, and that goes back to the fact that if Tim Burton had
that's what that was my question. 89 Batman predated by what, couple years, by 2-3 years?
Well, 89 to 92.
Yes,
92 is when Batman came out.
Yes. So, I mean, a lot of the discussions that I'm seeing over the past couple of days have come down to who is the best Batman. And it's literally Michael Keaton or Kevin Conroy. And for some people, it's Kevin Conroy because that's what they grew up with.
Well, that and the fact that they didn't have to see him act. He didn't have to do the physicality that Michael Keaton had to.
He provided the voice,
Yeah,
and that it really gave into it. You know,
I think that there's a
but I
difference,
can't say that Tim Burton is at the top of his game all the time because he was going to do Superman Returns.
No,
I've
that's
seen
not
stuff from that.
But that's not what we were talking about, though.
No, I mean, I'm talking about.
If it wasn't for Tim Burton doing.
Oh, you're
Batman,
right. And
him bringing
we
back
wouldn't have
Batman.
seen.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't have seen creators get the recognition and the money that they were owed, because Bruce Kane and who's the guy who created Batman? Bob Kane and the other guy. There was two of them.
Mm-hmm.
Bob gets the credit, but there was another person who helped him.
Kind of like how Steve gets the credit for everything in Marvel, but Ditko and Kirby were like, "Hey, right."
Okay, Kirby didn't tell stories. He did them in images.
Yeah.
He would hardly ever write anything in down or plot. He just let his mind wander and he drew images. I don't think Marvel would have made it if it weren't for him and Stan working together.
Yeah.
You know, and Stan came up with ideas and has said, "Hey, typed it up, handed it, and go run with this, Kirby." And Kirby went with it. But then it came back to Stan. He goes, "You know what? My audience is going to see this. They still need a story." So he would have to look at the images and write a story based on what was in front of him. That takes skill.
Why are you gonna just ignore Ditko like that, though?
I liked it. I love it because Ditko wasn't the only person. You know, there were a lot of Sam Buscema, you know, a lot of people who created characters, and Marvel gave them their big chances. I mean, they used to bring in a lot of young artists, let them sit around and get to know these people and learn how to draw. Everybody wants to badmouth people after they're gone. But the fact of the matter is, if things hadn't landed the way they did, if there weren't visionaries in position at the time, we wouldn't have any of this stuff, because the guys who owned those companies played golf with each other and made dollar bets as to who could sell this story or this story. You know, they didn't care what was published. You know, and I grew up in a time when there were love comic books about girls wanting to date and, you know, all this other stuff. And it was drawn straight out of the old newspaper comic strips, just added to a comic, you know. Comics were so much more than just superheroes back then. You had police stories, you had actually murder mysteries, you had love stories, you had
House of Mystery,
and then
all the classic
like
creatures,
Spooky and Casper and Wendy, Richie Rich, and all these other comics. And they had to be pumped out, like, you know, every week. Regularly.
That's right. They were the old 15-cent comic books were cranked out weekly.
Superheroes actually came about because they wanted to give the soldiers something to read when they were in the theater of war,
right?
You know, and then something for kids to look up to. They were propaganda pieces,
you know? And that gave birth to like the Phantom and Doc Savage and the Shadow,
and then I remember all the Gold Key comics. Remember Gold Key, Charlie, and I mean Charlatan was something else. Who did It wasn't. Golki had Magnus Robot Fighter, Torok Dinosaur Hunter, all these stuff that
Valiant
y'all's
ended up picking
generation
up,
discovered
yeah.
through video game adaptations and Valiant buying up the properties. But they've been around since I was a little kid. Lost in Space, a bunch of space opera stuff.
Yeah.
Science fiction, really hardcore science fiction. Some of it was really hardcore science fiction too.
But I mean, like that kind of stuff, right? It makes you wonder moving forward, right? Because Conroy has been the basis for the voice of Batman for so long. It's like you almost kind of wonder when that paradigm shift is going to hit again, and you're going to have a new defining person behind that. I mean, it's maybe it's bad to be talking about moving on for someone after they pass, but it's one of those things that it is, right? It's a generational thing. Someone establishes something for a generation at a time, and at some point it shifts and it changes, and it'll be curious to see when that eventually happens and what that looks like in comparison to the groundwork that Conroy laid and the imitations that have followed ever since.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and what's funny is like Conroy was one of those unusual ones who played him multi-generationally.
Yes.
He spanned multiple generations. Fathers, sons, and grandfathers knew him. Fathers watched it with their kids, and now those kids grew up to be fathers and watched it with their kids. So you don't get that very often.
No. And he was a very gracious individual.
Yes.
That was one of the constant comments that I saw everywhere, was everyone talking about just how awesome he was at conventions.
Yes.
Him, and I met the guy who played Herschel from Walking Dead. They were sitting next to each other. And they were, hey, come back here, come over here and sit with us and talk with us. If Vince had answered his phone, he'd have Kevin Conroy on his phone answering his phone machine, because he said he'd do it. We called him right there at the desk, and it was his voice messaging, and he was like, come back and we'll try to do it later. And I never could get in touch with him, and I was like, I'm sorry.
I had a meeting. I can't. It's one of those things.
I know.
Your job can only do so much.
I love the people who love their audience and understand the audience is what gives them this fantastic life. But there's some actors who think every second is money to them, and you should be privileged to pay them to have that kind of contact with them. And that's what's different in the world today, and especially in cons.
Yeah, and Kevin was not like that. He was not. He was all about the family. He was all about being grateful and very gracious. And the next person who comes along to be the definitive Batman, that Kevin would be like, he would be like, okay, this is what responsibility this is what's going to be on your shoulders. And just be you.
Yeah.
Right. It's standing on the shoulder of giants, realizing that you're elevated because somebody else did something.
Right.
But I understand what David's saying, because we have so many actors that like when you're reading a comic, you have your own voice.
Yes.
And that voice for the characters you're reading about will stay with you throughout your life. You'll recognize it, you'll hear them. Until if you find that one actor who personifies that better than what you could have come up with, then you replace them with that new voice. And it's like, I would have never picked Hugh Jackman to play Wolverine, but now in my mind, I can't see anybody else playing him.
Exactly.
So it's really hard to decide who should be the next one. And I think that we've already had a giant play Wolverine. I think we should now have a short, stocky guy play Wolverine. I want to see some kind of new version of him. Instead, we know what Wolverine looked like for when Hugh Jackman played him, but I want to be surprised again. I want to feel that new discovery of a new actor playing him and falling in love with the character all over again. And we don't get that now because too many people are saying, I don't want to see it. If it can't be this actor, I don't want it. Well, Wolverine's Hugh Jackman's going to be 90 years old one day, and I don't want to see him running around and de-age through technology.
That's where the face technology comes in, and we won't need new actors anymore. We'll just reskin new people.
Yeah,
Just
deep fake.
Yeah, and that's what scares me.
Well, then you
Well,
can
it's
also do the
AI
whole voice thing too. You can just take their voice vocabulary from everything they've ever done, and then
Yeah.
Which-
at that
Well,
point, you just feed it
there's a
lines.
company there's a company in California now that does digital scans. They
They just
build them
signed
in
James Earl
in a
Jones.
computer, and then they also do the voice. They build a library of voice, and so these are going to be digital actors.
Yeah,
We
and that's
don't even need the originals anymore.
Yeah.
And what makes that so sad, right, is the fact that, you know, like what you're talking about, where Conroy just knew, hey, in this moment, in this instance, with this character, I need to change just this little bit, right? I need to adjust it and being an actor, being there in the moment, knowing the character, knowing the story that's being told, and being able to make those kind of alterations and changes on the fly, right?
On the
Be able to
fly. Yes.
and say, hey, you know what? I think it needs to be like this. And that's where the magic comes from, right? That's where
Exactly.
that instinct of knowing who you're embodying and having a personal experience to it, right? Like having something emotional inside you move and be able to say, okay, I found it. Now let me express it, right?
Right. And it goes back to the creativity of someone like Robin Williams, who would throw 100 versions of a character out in a voice session, and I'll give the voice director options.
Yep.
And
Right.
then they go, okay, can you take this piece of this one, take a little bit of that one, and throw it in a blender with this one and give me that? And he could do it. You know, that is talent. And we don't seem to have that. I'm sorry. I mean, a lot of the people are two-dimensional now. You know, they want to play themselves in a role. They don't want to become the role.
Well, that's the one good thing about with the Batman voice actors we've gotten. They've all given a unique take on their portrayal of who Bruce Wayne is.
Who they're playing. Yeah.
You know, Jensen Ackles, you know, as
That's
both Batman and you know,
good.
Jason Todd.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. Of all the voice actors out who have had a shot at Batman, who is best likely to carry on the legacy following Kevin Conroy?
It depends on the Batman you're gonna do. I could see Jensen Ackles playing a modern take on Batman
because he's doing another Batman. There's another one that's coming out that he's Batman on.
But if you want to do a detective Batman who is less into the fighting and stuff and more about the scientific, you have to have somebody who can act that role, who can understand it. I can't see Jensen Ackles in a lab. I'm sorry, I love you, man, but I can't see him sitting there with test tubes and looking at fingerprints and running computer scans and all this other stuff. That is what I'm dying for. I want to see that in a Batman. We got a little bit of it in the new Batman, but it wasn't enough for me. You know?
What if they got Pattinson to go cross board like they did with Matt Ryan?
I'd like to see Pattinson play him again. I'd like them to give him at least 3 movies
Well,
because he's going to
they're
grow
already working
into
on
the
the second
character.
one.
Well, anything's possible, but Warner Brothers is canceling stuff as fast
No,
as they put it
they've
on.
said that with the whole change up and Bumbleface there. What's his name there? The two of them that are. Thank you. The two of them that are they're setting up the Bible. They said there won't be 4 Batmans, but the Pattinson stuff is still continuing, and Keaton and Affleck are both going to show up in Flash, and then they're going to decide what to do from there.
Yeah.
So the Pattinson stuff is going forward with a sequel. They've already announced that.
I'll believe it when
I see it.
Yeah, comes up on the screen.
But taking the premise of Robert Pattinson actually owning the role of Batman, okay, and giving us a good, solid Batman, and you have the right writing people, like Kevin Conroy had the right people writing the Batman animated series. Would you see him as being a good animated voice for it, or do you think
that I don't know? I don't know, because there has to be a specialness to the voice. If you're just carrying it all through the voice, it's the same reason why what's his name from the Kingsman, the British guy.
Mark
Taron
Strong.
The one I've been wanting to play Wolverine.
Taron Egerton.
He cannot act if his eyes, because he says I'm an emotional person. You have to see my eyes, you have to see my face, because I portray all my emotion through my face. If I'm covered up, it's going to be horrible. I feel the same way with a voice actor. You need somebody who can do those things with their voice. Who's the guy who plays in Walking Dead, plays Ezekiel? Can you look his name up?
I will in a second, but I wanted to add one person that I think that has played, I think, Batman the most, besides, at least far as the animated films, and that is Jason O'Mara.
Yes.
I like his portrayal of Bruce.
He was the one in the new run of the animated movies, right?
He's been doing it for a while. I mean, he's like,
yeah, but what's his name
different
did
movies.
some of the what's his name did some of those new movies too. The one I was talking about, and I can't remember his name.
Because he's been in Justice League Dark, Apocalypse War. He was Batman.
He was all the way back to the first one where
Death and Return of Superman, The Hush, Reign of Superman, The Death of Superman, Justice League Dark.
It goes
Justice
all the way back
League versus the Teen Titans, Bad
Yes.
Blood. I mean,
whole-
Batman and Robin.
yes.
He's been doing Batman for a while, and I think that he could do it.
Let's get our final thoughts in on Kevin Conroy, and let's call it a night here. I'm sorry,
That's okay.
For those of you who don't know, I'm trying to repair the front of my house and build my studio, and my house tried to eat me twice now, and I've fallen through, and the pain meds have worn off, and I am in self-medicating mode to trying to deal with it.
No, I was just gonna say I was at their house and I watched a very old cartoon with Edward, and he sat and watched the whole thing. And I was like, wow, he's got all these new shows, all this other stuff to watch. But as he walked through the room, it caught his attention. He sat down, he asked the appropriate questions about what was going on, and he had an opinion about it. And it didn't bother him. And those are timeless.
It really, it's a different strength and style of writing, right? I mean, there's still good stories and things out there for sure, but it feels like everything's become so mass marketed in a lot of ways that there's a lot of that human element, the really true, diehard fans that were putting their all into a lot of this stuff is kind of left out now that it went from the niche thing that it once was to the big multi-billion-dollar marketing juggernauts that they are. So it's like, yeah, we just got to get new product, got to get it out. Come on, let's go. Got to get more eyes on it. Got to get more people in it. Got references. We got to do references. We got to hook in all the nerds, and then we got to get in the people that aren't nerds, but claim they are nerds, and bring them in and make them feel good. And by the time you get to the end of it, it's just this washed out product. But yeah, there's a lot of old stuff that you pull up, and like what you talked about, right? Animated series has a timeless feel to it just because of the art style they went with, the passion that you can see in almost every frame of that show, all the way down to, again, just the voice casting, right? It all just nailed everything it needed to at a time to create the foundation for which everything is sitting on now.
And right there, that is perfect ending. You nailed it.
It's definitely a product of his time. All right, everyone. I'm sorry we're having to cut this short. Down below, let us know what your memories of Kevin Conroy are. And we would love to read them. Until then, everyone, have a great one. We know it's a short one, but hey, it's a good one. Catch you later.
Deuces.